My name is Davina West. For 15 years, I ran the Strategic Operations Division that executives bragged about and quietly depended on. I didn't chase attention, I fixed problems. When deals stalled, I stepped in. When clients hesitated, I stabilized them. My record wasn't inspirational, it was inconveniently solid. That's why the invitation felt wrong. A mandatory strategic alignment meeting, chaired by Jonathan Pierce, our CEO. Before I tell you what's going to happen at that meeting, could you tell me what the temperature is where you live if it's cold? Remember to stay warm. And please let me know your lucky number in the comments so we can say hello. You might not know this. Jonathan had a talent for sounding reasonable while dismantling people's careers. By the time I sat down, I already knew this wasn't about alignment. It was about removal. He didn't start with my name. He started with language. We need to evolve, Jonathan said calmly. The market is changing. Then he gestured toward Olivia Grant. 29, perfect posture, imported confidence, our new head of strategic operations. He announced, a rising star. I waited, so did the room. Jonathan finally turned to me. The market wants fresh energy. Davina, I didn't hesitate, last quarter. It wanted results. A pause, polite, heavy. Jonathan smiled like he'd anticipated resistance and rehearsed patience. This isn't personal. He said, it's progress. He explained my options carefully, as if kindness lived in the details. I could stay on as senior advisor, report to Olivia, take a 40% pay cut. It's a chance to transition gracefully. He added, gracefully. After 15 years, I didn't argue, I didn't defend my numbers. I opened my notebook and started writing, titles, phrases. The exact moment Jonathan stopped saying my name, I've learned anger clouds memory, and memory is leverage. The meeting ended, chairs scraped, people avoided eye contact. My phone vibrated once. I waited until Jonathan said, that's all. Before looking, the message came from one of our largest clients, someone who never asked pointless questions. Is it true you're no longer leading our account? Shock landed first, then insult, then something colder took hold. I closed my notebook slowly. I didn't reply. Not yet. From that moment on, the story is no longer simple. What follows contains fictional elements and is I assisted to highlight the humanistic message and emotional experience. Hopefully, you'll find something for yourself. If not, take good care of yourself, and we'll see each other again later. I watched Olivia Grant settle into my chair like it had always belonged to her. She spoke fast, confidently, layering buzzwords as if volume could replace understanding. We'll pivot aggressively, she said. An AI-first model lets us reimagine client engagement. Jonathan Pierce nodded along, satisfied, as if repetition equaled strategy. I listened without interrupting. The project on the screen wasn't theoretical. It was a live expansion with regulatory landmines and contracts balanced on timing. If we change direction now, I said calmly, we risk breaching milestones already approved by the client. Jonathan cut me off mid-sentence. We're done doing things the old way, he said, glancing at Olivia. That approach is exactly why we need new leadership. Olivia smiled. Relieved. I recognized the expression. It wasn't confidence. It was permission. The meeting moved on without me. Decisions were made quickly, enthusiastically, and without context. I took notes, not because I needed them, but because observation sharpens judgment. Watching someone dismantle your work is clarifying when you're not emotionally attached to their success. By the afternoon, my phone began to vibrate again. Not messages, calls, numbers I knew without checking. Former clients asking careful questions. Are you still overseeing our account? One asked. Another lowered his voice. Who signed off on this change? I answered professionally. I explained nothing. Silence. I've learned. Forces people to reveal their priorities. The last call came as I was leaving the building. No small talk, no hesitation. Davina, he said, if you leave, we leave. I spent the night after that meeting doing something Jonathan Pierce never imagined. I didn't rewrite my resume. I reviewed my relationships. 15 years of work wasn't stored in a job title. It lived in inboxes, call histories, and favors returned without paperwork. I listed names slowly, clients who trusted me when contracts were fragile, CFOs who called me before boards panicked, board members who valued outcomes over optics, regulators who answered when I called because I never wasted their time. I wasn't an employee, I was connective tissue. That clarity settled something inside me. Jonathan believed authority flowed downward. He thought titles controlled loyalty. That's why he assumed I would stay. Accept the senior advisor label, report quietly, and fade. From his perspective, leaving would look reckless. From mine, staying would look dishonest. The next morning, I watched him perform certainty in the hallway. "Take some time," he said, lowering his voice. "You'll see this is the smart path." He genuinely believed he was being generous. I nodded, thanked him, and walked to my office. I packed efficiently, not out of anger, but precision. When you know where your leverage sits, urgency disappears. Before noon, I called human resources. I declined the revised role. I accepted the exit terms. Jonathan was notified shortly after. He didn't come to see me. He didn't need to. In his mind, this was resolved. It wasn't. As I stepped outside, my phone rang with a number I recognized instantly. An executive from a competing firm. Someone I'd worked beside for years. No small talk. "We've been watching this," he said. "If you're leaving, we'd like you to lead our U.S. market." I stopped walking. Traffic moved. The city stayed loud. "I'm not leaving a company," I said carefully. "I'm changing addresses." He laughed once. "Good. Let's talk today." That was the moment I understood exactly what I'd built, and why Jonathan never saw it coming. The power wasn't loud or dramatic. It was patient, cumulative, and invisible to executives who mistook authority for ownership until today proved them wrong completely and publicly forever. I left the building without a farewell email, without cake, without speeches. I carried a box that looked symbolic but wasn't. The important things were already elsewhere. Calm followed me out. When you've made a clean decision, noise loses its grip. The first week unfolded exactly as I expected. 2 contracts were suddenly under review. Language executives use when clients start asking questions leadership can't answer. Another project was paused for alignment, which meant nobody wanted to sign their name to Olivia's timeline. I didn't celebrate, I observed. Dominoes don't fall loudly at first. Jonathan Pierce called on the 3rd day. His voice was tight, legalistic. He reminded me of the non-compete clause, of obligations, of consequences. I listened until he finished. "People aren't property." "Jonathan," I said, evenly. "And trust doesn't transfer with a title." He warned me again. I wished him a good afternoon and ended the call. What surprised him was how quiet I stayed. I didn't post. I didn't announce. I let clients reach their own conclusions. Phones rang. Meetings were requested. I answered professionally and said little. Calm, used correctly, accelerates truth. By the end of the week, the rumor became a pattern. Finance flagged revenue risk. Operations asked for clarification that never arrived. Jonathan scheduled emergency check-ins. None included me. That was fine. I'd already moved past needing acknowledgement. The final confirmation came through a message forwarded to me by a former colleague. Olivia's first major pitch, my former account had collapsed in the room. She led with vision, promised reinvention, skipped the constraints. The client asked about regulatory exposure. She answered with optimism. The meeting ended early. I closed my laptop and exhaled once. No anger, no relief, just certainty. The first domino had fallen, exactly where pressure had been building all along, and the line behind it was already leaning. I knew the math now favored momentum, not speeches, and that calm would keep multiplying consequences until Jonathan noticed too late. While I waited without urgency, watching systems strain, reputations slip, and decisions made earlier demand payment in full at once. Soon enough, I joined the new firm quietly, without announcements or headlines. Power doesn't need noise when it's ready. On my first morning, I didn't tour the office or study org charts. I opened my laptop and wrote a single email. It wasn't dramatic, no accusations, no explanations, just an update. I told my network I had changed companies. Nothing more. 15 years of relationships received it within minutes. Clients, CFOs, board members, regulators, people who knew exactly what my name meant when it appeared in their inbox. I didn't ask for loyalty. I didn't need to. By the end of the day, requests replaced questions. Conversations replaced curiosity. 2 letters of intent arrived before sunset. Another followed the next morning. Each one was brief, deliberate, and unsigned by lawyers who already understood the direction of gravity. Momentum doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. Inside Jonathan Pierce's building, the numbers began to argue back. Revenue projections dipped. Forecasts were revised. Someone labeled it temporary. Someone else called it weather. Jonathan demanded explanations he couldn't sit through. Spreadsheets don't soften reality. I stayed focused on execution. Meetings were efficient. Decisions were clean. The calm I carried unsettled people used to urgency. I wasn't chasing growth. I was absorbing it. Then the second wave arrived. Quieter but heavier. 3 names appeared in my inbox. Sequentially, senior people, my people. Each message was short. Each said the same thing differently. They were done waiting, done pretending, done reporting to someone who didn't understand the work. They resigned within the hour. Jonathan learned about it from HR, not from me, by the time he called. I already knew what he would say and what he wouldn't. I let it ring. Power doesn't interrupt itself. That night, I reviewed the signed letters again. Not for reassurance, but alignment. The network wasn't reacting. It was activating. And for the first time since the meeting where I was erased, I felt the shift complete, irreversible, and entirely earned. Quiet authority, once unleashed, moves faster than panic, outlasting resistance, reshaping outcomes without permission, applause, or any need for explanation at all. I expected Jonathan Pierce to panic. He did not disappoint. Within days, his lawyers surfaced, speaking in careful threats and heavier implications. One email cited non-compete language. Another warned of damages. None addressed why clients were leaving. He tried replacing substance with speed. Jonathan hired 2 so-called young geniuses in 1 week, announcing them internally like trophies. They spoke confidently, missed context, and asked questions my team solved years ago. Meetings multiplied. Answers didn't. The backlash arrived quietly. Clients complained about delays, then about confusion, then about trust. One told me later, "Your replacement keeps selling ideas instead of solutions." Inside the company, managers clashed over authority. No one knew who could approve anything. Systems hate ambiguity. Jonathan called me himself. His voice had changed. "Let's be practical," he said. "Come back. I'll double your salary. Full autonomy." He paused, waiting for gratitude. "You already spent your respect," I replied. Silence followed, then frustration. "You're burning bridges," he warned. "No," I said. "You burned them. I just stopped standing on them." He hung up. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Different tone, different intent. It was the former CFO of my old company. We hadn't spoken since I left. "I shouldn't be calling you," she said. "But things aren't right." She told me about rushed decisions, unexplained reallocations, numbers that no longer matched reality. Jonathan was pressuring finance to justify choices already made. I listened without comment. Conflict sharpens patterns. When the call ended, I understood Jonathan's mistake wasn't replacing me. It was assuming resistance would come loudly. It never does. It gathers information, waits, and moves only when pressure has nowhere left to escape. That knowledge steadied me. Jonathan was still reacting, swinging at shadows, mistaking motion for control. I wasn't fighting him. I was letting his own decisions close in, step by step, until every option narrowed itself. The more he pushed, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't confrontation anymore. It was exposure, unfolding at his pace. Not mine. It would end with consequences he could neither reframe nor outrun once truth finished surfacing completely for everyone. The call from the former CFO came late, after business hours, when people speak more honestly. She didn't waste time. Jonathan manipulated the numbers. She said, he reassigned costs, inflated expenses, and built a paper trail to justify removing you. Her voice shook, controlled but furious. I listened without interruption, letting each detail settle into place. She explained how the restructuring narrative was manufactured. Forecasts adjusted backward. Budgets shifted between departments. Performance metrics reframed to make my division look expensive instead of indispensable. Your team was profitable, she said. You always were. Jonathan hadn't replaced me because I failed. He removed me because I didn't bend. Anger surfaced, sharp and immediate, then compressed itself into something usable. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't confront Jonathan. I didn't leak anything. Rage makes people reckless. I wasn't interested in relief. I was interested in timing. Days passed. I continued building quietly while Jonathan unraveled publicly. His emails grew longer, his explanations more abstract. He was still trying to outrun numbers with language. Numbers don't chase. They wait. I stored what the CFO shared carefully, cross-checking dates and approvals. Facts don't need volume. They need context. I knew exactly what exposing this too early would do. Jonathan would spin it. The board would hesitate. The truth would get diluted. Then the invitation arrived. Jonathan Pierce was scheduled as a keynote speaker at the largest industry conference of the year. Leadership, transformation, ethics. His name sat at the top of the program, polished and bold. I read it twice, then once more. That was the moment I decided to stay silent a little longer. Public stages demand clean stories. They do not tolerate loose ends. Jonathan had chosen his spotlight, and unknowingly, his deadline. I closed my laptop. Calm again. Anger locked down tight. And waited. Some truths don't explode. They detonate precisely when an audience is already listening. I could feel the pressure building. Contained and deliberate. Knowing that when it surfaced, it would not sound emotional, but undeniable. Permanent. And impossible for anyone involved to ignore again completely. If you agree that waiting for the right moment instead of reacting emotionally was the correct move here, drop a 1 in the comments. Your perspective matters, because these decisions shape how we all understand power, accountability, and real leadership. I stood on the main stage as the keynote speaker, not as a protester or a victim, but as a professional invited to talk about leadership. The conference hall was full, attentive, expectant. My topic was simple on paper: leadership, transparency, consequences. The words felt heavier knowing who was sitting in the audience. I spoke calmly about decisions and accountability, about how systems reflect the ethics of those who run them. I avoided names. I avoided stories. Silence can be sharper than accusation when applied with precision. I could see Jonathan Pierce 2 rows back, stiff, smiling too often. During the Q&A, a journalist raised her hand. You left your previous company after many successful years, she said. What led to that decision? The room leaned forward. Jonathan stopped smiling. I paused. Measuring distance between truth and timing. Sometimes organizations make choices based on incomplete pictures. I said, when that happens, the most responsible response is to step away and let clarity arrive on its own. A murmur followed. I didn't elaborate. Another question came, this one softer. Do you believe transparency is negotiable in leadership? I smiled slightly. Transparency isn't negotiable, I replied. It's cumulative. You either build it over time, or you spend years explaining why it disappeared. Jonathan shifted. I didn't look at him. I closed my remarks by returning to consequences. Every decision leaves a trail, I said. Financial, cultural, human. Then I added, casually. That's why questionable numbers never stay quiet forever. The room froze. No accusation, no explanation, just enough. Applause followed. Delayed but real. Jonathan stood late, clapping without rhythm. I left the stage composed, untouched by adrenaline. Power doesn't need volume, it needs witnesses. As I walked off, I understood something clearly. Public silence, applied correctly, forces truth to speak for itself. And today it had started whispering loudly enough that Jonathan could no longer pretend he hadn't heard it. That realization settled in my chest, steady and absolute, confirming that restraint, not reaction, is what ultimately strips power from those who misuse it when scrutiny finally arrives, without warning for them. I didn't celebrate when the investigation opened. Internal reviews rarely begin with justice in mind. They begin with fear. Committees formed. Emails were preserved. Consultants arrived asking questions no one wanted answered. I watched from a distance. Calm, because the process no longer needed me. Jonathan Pierce lasted 3 weeks. That's how long it took before his confidence collapsed under arithmetic. The announcement came quietly. Jonathan has decided to step down. The board wrote, as if decisions fall from the sky. The stock dipped immediately. Clients paused. Employees updated resumes during lunch. Markets respond faster than loyalty. I felt nothing dramatic. No relief, no satisfaction, just alignment. This was the predictable end of a sequence Jonathan had started himself. 2 days later, a board member called. Then another. They asked for a meeting. Careful with their words. We'd like to explore a path forward, one said. Stability matters. I understood the translation. They wanted credibility back. They wanted me. I listened. I let them explain losses, reputational risk, leadership gaps. When they offered my old role, enhanced, protected, apologetic, I declined. I don't return to places that needed an investigation to recognize integrity, I said. Silence followed. Respectful this time. The company continued sliding. Revenue forecasts were revised again. Headlines sharpened. Jonathan's name vanished from press releases like it had never existed. That's when I made my offer. I'm not interested in reconciliation, I told the board on our final call, but my firm is interested in acquisition. I outlined terms calmly, professionally, retain staff, preserve clients, remove the rot without destroying the structure. I would lead the integration. No one argued. Justice doesn't raise its voice. It presents options and lets reality choose. When the call ended, I closed my notebook, steady and detached. Jonathan's fall wasn't personal. It was procedural, documented, inevitable, and the company that once erased me would now survive only by becoming something new, under leadership that remembered exactly how this collapse began. There would be no apology, only outcomes, and that was the cleanest form of justice I trusted in business and life alike. I didn't step into the CEO role with triumph. I stepped in with clarity. The merger closed quietly, efficiently, and I was asked to lead the combined company forward, not because I fought hardest, but because I endured longest. Olivia Grant vanished from the industry as quickly as she entered it. No scandal, no farewell, just silence. Jonathan Pierce lost something far more permanent. His credibility evaporated. No boardrooms, no stages, no second acts. When employees asked how it felt, I answered honestly, I didn't win. I was restored. Justice, I learned, isn't loud, it stabilizes. I walked the halls once labeled off-limits and felt nothing sharp, nothing bitter, only calm. Experience doesn't shout. It waits. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't ask permission. You can replace a title overnight, but replacing 15 years of trust, that's something you never recover from. I understood that lesson completely without regret. I learned something uncomfortable from this experience, Competence alone is never enough if you don't protect the relationships behind it. Skills build systems, but trust builds leverage. Titles can be taken away in a meeting. Reputation can't. What carried me through wasn't anger or revenge, but patience, clarity, and the courage to let consequences unfold without forcing them. There's also a quieter lesson here. When you're treated unfairly, you don't always have to react immediately. Sometimes the strongest response is restraint. Let people show who they are when you step aside. Let systems reveal their weaknesses when you stop holding them together. That kind of discipline isn't easy, especially when pride is bruised. But it's often the difference between a loud loss and a quiet restoration. If you were in my position, what would you do? Would you fight publicly? Or would you wait, observe, and choose your moment? There's no single right answer, but there is power in knowing you have one. I'm curious, where are you listening from right now? Different places shape different perspectives. And I read every comment because your experiences add meaning to this story beyond my own. If this story resonated with you, know that your support matters. A single subscription helps this message reach someone who might be doubting their worth at work today. A like or a share can put this story in front of someone who needs to hear that dignity and patience still matter. By engaging, you're not just supporting a channel, you're helping these stories travel. And sometimes, that's how real change begins. This story was fully created and produced by our team. We do not copy or borrow content from any other channel. Thank you for staying with us and listening until the end.